I was about 7 when this happened, and I need to give some backstory to this. My father loved scaring the shit out of me and my siblings in other ways than just abuse. So when it came to the dark, which I was extremely scared of and still am, he would go outside to my window and just stand there and stare at me through the glass. That not being scary enough, he would dress up in scary costumes too, and would also knock on the window and just stand there waving. Well, one night I was laying in bed watching Bones when I heard a knock on the window. I immediately jumped and stared at the window to see a man dressed in a clown costume. I just laughed it off thinking it was my dad, but my dad never just stood there for more than 5 minutes, especially because of how cold it was outside. But the man just kept standing there. I was frozen with fear, with the realization that this was not my father. All I could do was stare directly into this man's eyes. I couldn't move, wouldn't move. 2 episodes of Bones later, and the man was still standing there. I was about to get up when all of a sudden my sister and stepsisters barged into my room and the man left. I ran crying to my dad about it. He called the cops. The cops came, and that I know of, nothing was ever done. The man was never found. I used to live on a small farm in the US. Me and my best friend Zach used to go into the woods, and since we lived in the country, there was almost nothing to do. We would always explore and pretend to be treasure hunters. I always used to wear my dad's old cowboy hat, and Zach would take his small shovel. We would always go a bit deeper into the forest each time we went. We usually managed to find something interesting in the woods, like old coins, water bottles, some nice looking stones, and other things. Yeah, I know, really lame stuff, but we were kids at the time and we thought of it as treasure. Some creepy shit started happening over some time. One day while we were exploring the forest, we came across a well. We got really excited thinking we actually found something good. We checked it out, but there was nothing special and the well was dry. We headed back home and another day was over. The next day was a Friday, and after lunch, Zach came over with his cousins Danny and Simon. They wanted to go exploring with us, so we went. It was just a normal day for the most part, but Zach's cousins were total assholes, saying it sucked being in the woods and asking us how we never got bored out there. Later that night, around 11, I got a knock on my bedroom window. It was Zach and his cousins. They told me to come down. I managed to get downstairs without awakening my parents. I opened the door, and the cousins asked me if I wanted to go into the woods. I'd never been out there at night before, and to be honest, I didn't want to go. And that's what I told them. They said, "You're lost," turned and went into the direction of the tree line. I changed my mind, grabbed my dad's hat, and ran after them. I called up to them, and we started to walk deeper into the woods. I was scared shitless, and by the look on Zach's face, he was scared as well. The cousins stayed in front, shining their flashlights on the spooky trees. I noticed we were going in the direction of the well. I know the place like the back of my hand, so I had a plan in case shit hit the fan. We were coming up on the well, and suddenly the cousins stopped and turned off their flashlights. We asked them what was wrong. They froze, so we went around them, and we froze as well. There was a person standing in front of the well, not looking in our direction, thankfully. I stood there like a statue, not knowing what to do. Then one of the cousins, I think it was Simon, whispered, "Turn around slowly and walk away. Don't make any sudden moves." We all turned around and started walking back. One of us stepped on a twig, making it snap. It was loud. We all stopped. I looked back, and the figure is now looking directly at us. I almost fainted with fear. Then Danny screamed, "Run!" We all floored it. I dropped my hat while running back. I didn't stop to pick it up. I had no idea if the figure was following us, since all of our footsteps made it hard to make out. I didn't look back either. We all made it back safely. I ran into my house and slammed the door shut. My parents were awake. My mom hugged me and said, "I'm so glad you're safe." I was confused and asked them what they were so worried about. And then they told me something that made me even more scared. They told me that recently an escaped killer was on the loose and he was last spotted in our area. And when my dad saw that I wasn't in my room and the front door was open, they thought I'd been kidnapped, and they were about to call the police when I came through the door. After hearing that, I started crying. My parents asked me why, and I told them what had happened. Their faces were full of horror. After telling them that, they called the police immediately. The police arrived, and I explained everything to them. They said they would take a look in the woods. Later, they came back with nothing, but they said that they would be back the next day with more cops to search the area and warned me not to go back into the woods again. I could barely sleep that night because I was so afraid that the man would just come for me. The next day, more cops show up to our farm and started investigating the woods, and they also went to Zach's house. My mom came in and said that she had found my dad's hat on the doorstep. I remembered that hat last night. I dropped it. How did it get there? Thought about it some more, and then the man in the woods came to mind. I started panicking again. My parents calmed me down and asked me what was wrong, and I told them about the hat. They had a nervous look on their face, and my dad took the hat to the cops outside. I managed to calm down again, and for the rest of the day, I just played video games. Around lunchtime, we got a knock on the door. I answered it. It was Zach and his mom. Zach's mom asked me if she could talk to my parents. I told my parents they were at the door, and they told us to go play in our room. I put my ear against the door, and I listened. Zach's mom told my parents about Danny and said that he wasn't in the house this morning. And after hearing the news about that creep in the woods, she began to worry. One thing didn't make sense, though. All four of us made it out safely. I was confused. Then Zach told me that he went back into the woods. He said that he had saw Danny leave the house, and he watched him through the window but was too afraid to go outside to stop him. And then Simon came over, and he told us what had happened. Apparently Danny had lost his mother's ring, and his mother is dead, and apparently during the chase he just lost the ring, and he had to go back into the woods to find it, but he never came back. After that day, weeks went by, and the guy in the woods was never caught. The cops started an investigation on Danny's disappearance, and he was never found, and me and Zach never went back into those woods again. Once we reached 18, we bought a house and became roommates. Nothing's better than having a roommate as your best friend, right? I'm now 25, and I live with my girlfriend. I still hang out with Zach, but even after all this time, I still think about that night every day, and I probably will for the rest of my life.